There's some by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we
You can
sell.
wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. GM. Today is Saturday, 13th of July. All right, so where are we up to now? I was drawing out these couple paths for BTC and ETH, which I will go over on Trade of the Day, seeing if there's any trades that might set up this weekend. As for the daily levels, I want to kind of zoom out a little bit. First thing, the ETF flows that had been coming in have disappeared again, I believe. On the 12th. No, sorry. I was reading the wrong thing. 12th, Friday? Yeah. Actually, another good inflow day. Probably the biggest inflow day there has been for several weeks. Most of it coming from BlackRock and Fidelity. So, definite uptick. The ETF flows, net inflows, had been stuck between 14 and 15 billion for months. Now it's steadily ticking up towards 16 billion. So that's interesting. It's good to see. Price itself is sort of respecting that, but it's difficult to say right now because to me it's very clear where Bitcoin needs to flip. So it has to flip the old pivot level, we know this. Right? It has to flip that level, but also there's now a new support resistance level forming. So if this is going to kind of grind higher, it's going to flip these areas here and go like that, and it'll just kind of stair step its way and then break out. That's one of the ways it can move. If the bottom's in and the reaccumulation process is going to happen on the way back up, and you're not going to get a chance to buy Bitcoin lower, right? You know, people saying, oh, it's going into the 50s, it's going to the 40s, whatever. If that's not going to happen, you're probably going to see just a straight grind up. Because a lot of people expect, oh, it's going to do like this usual thing, comes up and it retests the lows and then it sweeps and like, there's no guarantee it will do that. There's obviously no guarantee of any direction it will go. The bias is still downside. The market is still clearly bearish. But the longer it spends around here and the longer it spends in the bands, which is not yet, but if it can spend some time in those bands compressing and getting them moving closer together, it decreases the downside risk. We're probably still at more risk of downside than going up, but it's getting very close. In terms of time, when you have when you have a strong downtrend and it goes lower and lower and lower, and every couple of days it's making new lows, right? Then we have a dip down into this low here, and then it doesn't make a new low for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days later, it makes a new low, right? Since this low, we put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're on the 8th day. For the strong trend to continue, where you're seeing it actually just move like you'd expect a trend to move, it's probably going to have to move down next week. Otherwise, you're more likely to go into a different phase where it's sideways and it might spend another couple of months chopping around there before it goes lower. Or, of course, bottom could be in. So, in terms of the bottom being in, for me, it's really simple. There's no point guessing over whether this little bit here is. I'm just going to wait until the bands go green, which, with the way they're spaced at the moment and with the resistance overhead, it's very likely that Bitcoin will come back above them and spend some time consolidating there first. You know, even in like the fastest reclaims that you can imagine, even when it reclaims these levels quickly, it's still going to spend some time consolidating, right? So you've got here, reclaims the bands, it still spends over a week consolidating above them. The fast reclaim, the only one of note here is, of course, the dip down, but that was like 3 or 4 days later we moved up. It's obviously been way longer than that. I wouldn't say that this is one of those fast flushes. But COVID, you're not going to get a bigger V reversal than COVID, right? So what price did, it went super, super, super oversold, and then it bounced up and it consolidated. So from the first time it touched the top of the bands, it was 20th of March. They turned green on the 6th of April. So you're looking at about, what's that, about just over 2 weeks. And then it consolidated longer and it retested that level once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and it was in nearly the end of April. So you had over a month of price building a really solid base on those bands, flipping them green, giving you loads of time to build long positions or to get confirmation on your longs or to flip. And of course, at the time, it doesn't look or feel like it, and that's why it's so effective, because would you buy that, right? After the COVID crash, you see this, everyone's like, oh, this is definitely like that. It's going back to the lows, it's going to retest, it's going to go lower. So despite the fact that you know that this is bullish, it still looks bearish. And that's what's so good about the market in general. When you get these kind of scary moves, people will just tend to fade them all the way. So I'll consider this as bearish until proven otherwise by the bands. And once you start to flip and you start to see these bands crossing over, that's it, right? If bands go green, we're bullish. I'm long, and that's it. You're going to be long in the 60, low 60, 60, 61, 62 maximum, instead of guessing at 58. So from a high time frame perspective, if your target is 80, 90, 100, the opportunity cost, chopping yourself up, fucking around, trying to get long at 57,999 or fucking, like, what's the difference of 58k and 61k when you get all the extra confirmation? And when structures break multiple times, you also get a better invalidation, right? Because if it breaks the structure and breaks the structure and then it's up here and you've got long over here at 60, 61, and then there's a further structure break up here, your invalidation doesn't have to go at the lows. Your invalidation can go below the bands and below the local structure. So you still have the best invalidation for swing trades. So anyway, ETH ETFs, I've heard nothing. There's been still no confirmation, which is definitely later. Ethereum eagerly waiting on SEC. If I had updates, yeah. So there's really nothing yet, which they were supposed to be done this week so they could go live next week. But whatever. I mean, it's not a massive deal, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. ETH is climbing back up, showing a bit of strength up into this area here. I mean, I talked about this the other day, if you remember, that whenever we were down here, when you hold these lows, ETH has had a tendency to bounce up as high as this area here. It would go as high as 33.50, and the lowest bounce off it was probably about there, about 32.10. So there you go. And so we bounced right up to the kind of the lowest point. So when price comes to this support area, bounce, 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 and then the big bounce. And so the first touch, give us a small bounce, second bounce, here we go, up to here. And I'd expect something probably similar where it chops around, takes out that high, and then comes back down. And it's either going to go to new lows when the ETF selling starts, or the ETF selling is not going to be enough to take it lower and we consolidate. And it maybe puts in this very weird looking long-term bottom. And again, the exact same thing as Bitcoin. If it flips above here, flips that zone from resistance into support, then we're bullish. Very simple. I think the Ethereum SR is very simple. It's quite clearly, it wasn't able to bounce more than this level. It got above that with an impulse because of the ETFs. It couldn't hold it. So that's kind of the area to flip. Bands go green, flips that zone, boom. Swing trades, first target, 4K. Second target would be all-time high. And there you go. So plenty of nice swing trades on the way and presenting themselves. I still think that we're weeks away from them rather than days or hours, which also lines up with my overall thesis about kind of September, October, November, December. The last 4 months of the year are going to be the best in my opinion. And for that to happen, July and August can be bad. And in fact, if they're worse, it probably just sets up even better conditions for the later in the year. But everything gets front round, of course. So I'm not sitting back complacently waiting on it, watching every single day, waiting for these confirmations. Once we start to get them, away we go. Now, the other thing, the other way, I like the daily bands, but I also like 4 hour 50, 100, 200 trend. So Solana is trying to, now the purple has to be above the red, above the blue. There you go, 50, 100, 200. When they flip back above, that's a bullish 4 hour uptrend. So Solana's bearish. ETH, bearish, obviously. Bitcoin, obviously bearish. Is there anything that's in a bullish 4 hour uptrend? I actually want to check on the stocks closed. Yeah. Stocks had a really aggressive squeeze up. When I mentioned that you had that news event failure, they got an aggressive squeeze into Friday's session. And it seems like it just squeezed out everyone who was trying to get short. Just touched off the highs. Everyone trying to catch the hero short again. That is disgusting. Look at that. People say that liquidity doesn't matter. Hits the highs, flushes down. I think that's probably it. I think that is a local top. You can tell by the Nasdaq, in my opinion. Being so much weaker than the S&P, when the Nasdaq has traditionally been the one that has been leading this entire rally. But I digress. Now, probably nothing here that's in a 4 hour uptrend, right? Pepe, no. Ondo, no. Link, no. Toncoin better than most, but it's coming out of a 4 hour uptrend and losing it. So that's the wrong way to go about it. It's been in the trend and it's finishing, so that wouldn't be any interest to me. Seisui, Neon, Render, Near, Tau, WorldCoin, AKT. No, I don't think there's much. There's probably one or two if you look somewhere. What's most notable, or what you want to keep an eye on, is which sectors or which coins are starting to get there first, right? To see anything in a 4 hour uptrend from here would be quite rare, but which ones are getting closest? Bonk doing better than most, is trying to squeeze them. Whiff, nope. I think Bonk looks like one of the best, to be honest. Bitcoin Cash, look at this piece of shit. It's trying its best. Ripple, another piece of shit, trying its best. GM. Ripple's probably going to be the first one that actually flips back into a bullish uptrend if it can hold that, which will give you a nice swing trade potential. So in the chat, trading chat, tell me if you see any, which ones you see. And that's it. Bitcoin, ETH, Solana. Early look at some 4 hour trends which aren't flipping yet. So it's still patience is the name of the game. GM, GM, GM.